Kia ora koutou. It's my great pleasure to welcome you all here tonight. This is the fifth of six Fast Forward lectures. Thank you for battling through the rain, through the stormy weather outside. It's a great pleasure to have you with us tonight. A little bit of housekeeping to start with. Bathrooms out the door and kind of straight across the corridor. Assembly area is out on Simon Street. I guess you'll want to take your umbrellas with you should things go a bit sideways. If you need CPD points, there's in various spots around the room, there's a kind of QR code. If you scan that, that will take you to where you need to go to register your CPD points. Really important for us to thank Jib, who are the sponsors of the Fast Forward lecture series, have been for 15 years. You know, they're a tremendous kind of support to the Fast Forward program and to the school. We certainly couldn't do a lot of what we do without their tremendous support. So I'm going to show you a video of Jib's new factory. So again, huge thanks to Jib. The folk were telling me an amazing story about the factory, this new factory with all new kit in Tauranga last week. The drying machines are so efficient. They produce, the moisture comes out of the Jib as they're making the things, but they're so efficient at keeping the heat inside the machinery that the factory itself is cold, and so they've now got this new problem of clouds forming inside the factory because the machines are so efficient. So they're having to run around and make the machines slightly less efficient in order to prevent clouds forming inside the factory. Amazing. Thank you for coming. So tonight's speaker is Jade Kake. We're very excited to hear from her. To introduce her very briefly so we can hear as much as we can from her. Jade is one of those people that seems to be able to do everything. I think what the Americans call a triple threat. First, I think it certainly came to my attention first winning the Warren Trust Writing Award. I think you won it 2 years in a row.
Yeah, and then they made me be a judge.
so you didn't get to avoid the three-peat. And also incredibly active as an organiser, as an activist, working with local communities, and particularly what we're hoping to hear about tonight is work as a designer, and particularly doing super interesting, innovative things with marae, with papakāinga, and also with civic spaces, particularly up in Whangārei, and really of late seems to have a accelerating output. Like there's a whole stack of projects that are kind of emerging into the public realm. So we're really excited to hear about those. So if you would join me in putting your hands together and welcoming Jade Kake.
Am I on? Yes, I did listen to the instruction about how this works. Tēnā koutou katoa. Ngā mihi nui ki a kaitei o koutou haramaki konei ki te atu whakarongo ki a hau. Ko te tūmanako ka tae o te whakatakoto i etahi whakaaro pai, etahi whakaaro reka. Koina te tūmanako. Thank you so much everyone for coming out on this windy, rainy, unpleasant night. I know it really puts us all off actually. We just want to go home and be warm. So thank you to everyone who braved the cold to be here. I raced down from Whangārei, which sounds like very poor planning, but I had an important project meeting today that had to be today, and it just went that way. So I got straight in my car from my meeting and rolled on down here and got lost and had to call Andrew. I thought it was going to be in that other room it's often in. Great, so I think when I got invited to do this talk, obviously I traipse about and do a bit of talking about things that I'm up to. And often I talk about papakāinga and marae, which are all projects really close to my heart. But I thought for this one, it might be nice to talk about some of the cultural landscape work we've been doing in Whangarei. And I say we, meaning my hapu, but also Matakohe, which is the company that I founded about 6 years ago. We just turned 6, which is in a tumultuous economic environment. Nice to be 6 now. I think a lot of the amazing things that are happening in terms of regeneration of Whangarei, they don't sit with us alone, but since I've been working alongside my kaumātua, I've been privileged to be involved in a lot of really amazing projects, and you can now start to see the changes in the urban fabric of Whangarei. For those of us who are from there, it's somewhere really dear to our heart, and there's many layers of whakapapa and meaning and history. Those aren't always visible, those aren't always on the surface. Sometimes there's a very colonial, or should I say, kind of ugly 70s kind of overlay. And it's been a real joy to kind of work collaboratively to start to unpeel those layers and reveal something new and exciting for the future. So I'm going to whip through a few different projects, and besides showing some of the cool stuff our hapu has been doing in terms of integrating our cultural narratives and our understanding of tikanga within civic and public spaces, I also wanted to show a bit of a spectrum of collaboration, ranging from the first project where it was actually the very first one that I did, besides our papakāinga that we were working on at the same time. It was the first cultural narrative public space one that we did. And that was really more around facilitating, deciding what narratives could be expressed, uncovering the history. And there was a bit of design interpretation, but not that much, because a lot of the design decisions had already been made. But the things we got in were great. And then the next project, there was more collaboration again and greater design role. The next one was really quite squarely in partnership with the other architects. And then the last one I'll show, we were the sole architects. So we've been kind of working our way up, at least in this space. And why that last one is quite important, and I'll talk about it when I get to it, is that was the first time we were both the sole architect and we were also leading the cultural narrative integration and working alongside our kaumātua and our artists. That's not to say we don't want to collaborate. Collaborating's fantastic, but I do think that it was great for us to also be able to demonstrate that we can do both of those roles on a complex project. And it opened last Friday, so I was actually really excited to show you a little sneak peek. This is I shouldn't say not very professional, but I haven't managed to get professional photographs of these. So these are all my photographs. And I really must think about setting aside money for photographers in the marketing budget if we're going to be doing ambitious projects that get shown a bit, which is like a little bit different to when you're doing a marae project, which is beautiful and special. But anyway, so that's what I'm learning as a small practitioner, is actually like photographs and things are important. So hopefully my photographs will make do. So I haven't even clicked the first slide, but Whangarei Te Rangaparaoa, that's what it's all about. And also what I want to thread through this talk is a bit of information about our whakapapa and history, so that you understand where we are in the world and the things that are important to us. And sometimes, and I will flick to the first slide very soon, sometimes I feel like to outside people, they kind of see these squabbles amongst and between our hapu, and they don't realise that we're all really, really closely related and we all know each other really well. So like, oh my goodness, this is really overwhelming. But it's like, oh look, they're yelling at each other now, it'll be fine, tomorrow, don't worry about it. Which I can say because I know how they all connect, but I think sometimes the complexity of relationships is something to grapple with in these kind of Māori spaces and within our hapu spaces. Cool. Ka pai. I thought I might also share a little bit of my whakapapa through what I like to call a flash pepeha. So it's not like where you just say, which is fine, but you know, ko ngā puhi tōku iwi, ko ngā te hau tōku hapu, te mea te mea. The flash one is where you kind of take you on a little bit of a journey. So, ka tūwau ki te tihi o tōku maunga, ko Pairihaka. I stand atop my maunga of Pairihaka. Ka whakamanu au iau, I turn myself into a bird. Ka rere ahau mai te tihi ki taku awa, ko hōteo, ko hā te rānei. And then I fly down to my river, which we call hōteo, which is like a calabash for bearing water, which is a really old word and an old name that's being reclaimed, but it's also known as hātea. And there isn't consensus that it's hātea or hōteo, but amongst my hapu, we favour the hōteo version, but I wouldn't say either is wrong. Ka kauhoi au I taku awa, I taku awa Aotearoa. Mai te Pūtahi tai noa ki te waha o te awa. So I swim in my awa from the beginning, which this isn't, this is kind of halfway through. I can almost see my house from here. And then swim down to the mouth of the awa. Tai noa ki te waha o te awa, ki Whangārei tiringa parawa. So to the mouth of the awa and to Whangārei tiringa parawa, which is the name of our harbour. Ka tai mai au ki taku motu, ko Matakohe, ka hīkoia hau, ka kake ahau, ki te tihi o tēnā motu, o tēnā pā. Ka titiro au ki taku taone nui o Whangārei. So I climb up to the top, and this used to be a pā site of our tūwhana, and I look out over the town area. And tētahi mea noa pāna ki te ingoa o tēnei motu. So what the name means is Matakohe is about the kohe tree clinging to the rock face, te mata o te kohatu. And there's no kohe trees there now, but there was, and that was the tohu that led to the name Matakohe. And then the kohe, you know, a bit like kai kohe, it just gets kind of shortened. And that's the ingoa, te ingoa o tēnei motu, waihoki te ingoa o taku Pākehī. So I named my business after this motu, one, because it was a tūpuna pā site, but two, because of this view, where if you're standing at the top, you can see this amazing vista all around the harbour, and you can see all of those historic kāinga, historic pā sites, well, probably not all of them, but like most of them, and you can see the contemporary town area. And so I thought it was a bit of a tohu around what the future might look like with our positive intervention and reclaiming within this urban area. Oh yeah, very quickly, so I tīmata au tēnei Pākehī ngā tau ono kua hipa 6 years ago, started Matakohe with an ambitious dream that I continue to have. I can see some really seasoned practitioners, architects who've been their own bosses for a long time, so you all know that it's a hard hustle. But it's also a real joy and a real privilege, the kind of work that we get to do and the communities that we get to work with. And here's our awesome team, fabulous mix of skills and whakapapa, united by a kind of common belief and purpose about what we're trying to do, which is really walk alongside our communities. Something I often say to students, because I'm also teaching part-time at AUT, which is probably the wrong plug for this audience. I know we're at Te Waipapa Taumata, but I did want to mention it because something I often say to my students is look around at your classmates, because they might be either who you start a business with or who you end up working with in the future, and those relationships are really important. And I mention that here because two of my workmates are also friends from architecture school, and they agreed when I said, do you want to come work with me? And okay, on to a bit about the cultural landscape. So this is the city area, and you can see some of the sightlines to important landmarks that are outside of view. So Te Parihaka, which is our maunga, Pukenui, which is the Western Hills, Manaia, which is the beautiful view you can see when you come over the Brynduins and you look out and there's that jaggedy maunga. And a word on Manaia. So Manaia is also our tūpuna, and is the tūpuna for all of us who whakapapa to Whangārei. So it goes Manaia, and then 4 generations down from Manaia is Tahuhu Nui o Rangi. And I really always worry about getting this wrong. Yes, I did get it wrong. 2 generations from Tahu Nui Orangi, who's also listed as an eponymous ancestor, so we'll either say it's one of those two. 2 generations down from him was Tahu Pūtahi, and he married Reipai. So Reipai and Reitu, which is a very famous story that many of you may have heard, they were twins that came up from the Waikato on the back of a manu. They were off to go marry Uioneone up further north, and the sister, so Reipai heard her sister Reitu whispering in the manu's ear that she wanted Uioneone for herself, because they were both set to marry this guy. And so Reipai is like, nah, put me down. I'll wait for my brothers and my dad here. And so they put her down in Onerahi. Onerahirahi was another longer name that got shortened. And from there she waited, but actually then she met Tahu Pūtahi and married in. And so we all descend from Reipai as well, those of us who are from Whangarei. Cool, maybe a little bit about projects. Oh no, more history. So that pink outline is the original Caruth purchase. So in terms of old land claims, old land purchases, there's a few that are recorded that they call old land claims, and I don't quite know the distinction, but it was a particular point in time, possibly before the Native Land Court. I think that might be the delineation. And then there's another set of kind of, land titling exercises. But these early claims, there's 2 main ones in the Whangarei city area. One is the Caruth purchase, and one is the Mere purchase. And the Caruth purchase is this pink outline. And you can see it takes in like the town basin area, it takes in like the CBD area and up into Kensington, Regent, Western Hills. So it covers all of the projects, like the areas where all the projects that I'm going to talk about today are in this original Caruth purchase. And then this historic photo, which to be honest, I just grabbed from a document that my cousin made, and so it doesn't show the area I really want. But you can see some of it, which is a bit above the town basin. But even from this image, you can see that actually the land's been transformed a lot. There's been a lot of land reclamation and land shaping. And something that's really significant about that is that in 07 or 05, but I think it's 07, there was the Harbour Board Vesting Act, and what the piece of legislation did was claimed for the Crown all of the land below the high tide mark. But in Whangarei, we had a lot of land below the high tide mark and a lot of land that had started being dredged out of the sea anyway. So areas that were perfectly kind of serviceable, it was like, okay, well, the Harbour Board owns it now. So that was quite challenging, and it was a very big legislative tool used to alienate land in Whangarei. And in Whangarei district, the Waitangi Tribunal conceded that we were left virtually landless. So we ended up with, I think we got 4% of land, which sounds okay when you think, oh, it's about 5.5% nationwide. But if you go further up to like the far north, they're like got more like, 25%, 30%. It's a lot higher than Whangarei, which is really, really low. Cool. So this is a view of the pedestrian bridge, and I took it when I was walking from my house to go check out the Te Pūtahi Park. And there's the Handavasa, the famous Handavasa, which I think people have mixed views about, fair enough, and I think it's been a real catalyst project, and that's a really positive thing. My main concern, and I've got the stage, so I guess I can say it, is that I fear that our architectural identity as Te Tai Tukiro in particular is being defined by Handavasa's style, which I don't really think he himself would have wanted. It doesn't, to me, that doesn't align with the philosophy that he had. But maybe the answer is that we just need more strongly Te Tai Tukiro architecture that really reflects our identity and culture. And then this can just be, other things that are there that are great, that have a history and a whakapapa. Cool, and this is Te Pūtahi Park. Now, the name is around the confluence of salt water and fresh water, which is pretty much what happens around this point in the awa. And it's also about the mingling and kind of coming together of peoples. As I said, this was the first one we did that was kind of a public project, and our role was reasonably small, but it was quite significant because there hadn't been a lot of council-led projects where hapu had been invited to be involved in that way. Like, it really, I think, has only been happening for the last, maybe 8 years. And so, it's a really successful park and it's really well loved. But the scheme was pretty much set when the hapu got involved, and then we were able to add some things that I think really create a sense of place. So these patterns refer to the Pātiki, which I'm going to say used to be in the awa. So this location actually is, the real name is Te Ahi Pupurangi Ihinga. And Ihinga was a son of Taumata Kapua from Te Arawa Waka. And he was probably about 12th century, roaming about, naming places. And he stopped by the edge of our banks of our awa and, had a fire and roasted him up some kauri snails for a kai. And that was how this area got its name. And he named many places around the north. So that gives you, I guess, a few clues. One is that it was probably a good kai gathering spot, not too far from here. But also from talking to our kaumātua, they remember when the water was healthier and we had a lot more species. And I remember one time I sat down with one of the uncles and I was like, oh yeah, okay, what was in there when you were a kid? All right, list them. And it was writing down all the names of different shellfish and different fish and things that were in there. And I wouldn't consider it a mahinga kai now. It's just not healthy anymore, but that's a goal in the future, is for our harbour and for our waterways to be healthy enough to be able to gather kai moana again. So this remembers that even if it's not our current reality, it could be our future. And this is really neat, actually. And so I think this also is quite nice. I mean, the council wanted to do it because they're like, it's interactive, kids will love it, which they do. But I also think it speaks quite nicely to this idea of confluence and this meeting. And this is it at night. It didn't. And it used to be a car park, so this has really improved things. It's like much of Whangarei, what it used to be like maybe isn't that great, or what it is currently isn't that great. So like most interventions are going to be kind of positive, and like this is a million times better than having a car park. And my favourite narrative that got introduced is actually to do with when Caruth was allowed to set up to build himself a whare in this area. And so he asked Iwitahi, who was a rangatira of that time. I think it's kind of early 1800s, 1820s, around that era. And he's actually a grandson of Tiriro Tuatahi, who was the one that had that rumble, and then, the hapu got its name. And so he was one of the main rangatira at that time. And so Caruth said to him, well, where are the people of this land? Because it looked like no one was living there. And his response, and I've only actually seen this in English, so I'm not sure if he responded in Te Reo, which I assume he would have because of the time period. Most of those early kind of settlers and missionaries, they just learnt Te Reo because that's what everyone spoke. But I've only heard it in English, so I won't try to Māori it retrospectively, knowing that it could be not what happened. But anyway, basically in English it was, you'll find them towards the setting sun. And the gist of that was actually, Te Parapo's territory extends from Whangarei Harbour all the way out west through Tangitiroria, through that area. And so they were just there at that time. It wasn't like they didn't have the whenua anymore, it's just like, they moved around seasonally. And so, the collective that owned that land was over there. And I think for Iwitahi, he was happy to let this, settler have a house, no problem, go for it. But there was different, I read some of the things I've read, he did try to understand tikanga, and there were some famous missteps, like where he took a brand from a fire that was a cooking fire and then kind of mixed it up with something that he shouldn't have. Anyway, he burned something he shouldn't have that was kind of mixing tapu and noa, and there was a child and a woman there, and they were just horrified that he'd done that, and then they later died because of that breach of tapu, and those kind of things would happen. But from all accounts, he was trying to follow it, but it was just such a different system to him, and there was such different understandings. And so the point of this story is he kept putting up fences, but because he put his house and his fences right through a walkway where people always would go, they just would walk through his fence, walk through his house. They were like, well, this is the path that we take, so, what do you mean? And, so he kept having people walking through his house and walking through his fence, or knocking his fence down. And it took him a little while to get it. But I thought that was quite a nice thing to carry through into this park, because it reminds you of actually where you are in the world and the history of this whenua. Here's some more photos. This was this morning. Yeah. And it's, oh, and there's some native plant selections and so on, which is nice. Yeah, and there's some boats. Oh yeah, what I wanted to say about this one is, so you can see in the background, there's like the waterfront precinct, which is like, it's kind of a neo-colonial development, which is meant to look older than it is, but it was actually built in the 90s, which is why I really don't like it. But also at that time, Māori was specifically excluded. The council wouldn't allow us to have a presence there. And so that was part of why our hapu decided to set up Hihiaua, which many of you might be familiar with, which is the Māori Cultural Centre. It took a long time to come to fruition. So when you talk to Te Warahi Hetaraka, who's our tohunga whakairo for Te Tai Tukiro, he said, oh, you know, it was like my great uncles and stuff. It was like, you know, all of your kaumātua of that time, and he can name them to any of us who are alive now. Like for me, it was my uncle Ben and Charlie, but he's like, oh, I was just a young fella then. And then suddenly I look around and I'm the last one standing. So he's like held this kaupapa all this time for his old people. And it's, you know, it's only been operational, I don't know when it opened, maybe 8 years ago or something. It's not been around that long. Anyway, but that was such a treasured dream because this waterfront area was developed as this important sort of public space, and yet we were just completely excluded from it. So no love lost if those buildings come down. Cool, so this one is to Iwitahi, Whangarei Civic Centre. And so this is the next step of collaboration in my little sliding spectrum. And so we worked with Team Avery Architects on this. They were the architects on the project. Kerry Avery was really fabulous to work with. And we also worked with Literalis, who were the landscape architects, the local firm. And really we were brought in to support the integration of the hapu cultural narrative and to ensure that our tikanga was kind of meaningfully reflected in the design. And it did carry through the whole building and was considered through the whole building, particularly around tikanga requirements, and some of the themes on upper levels that are used for wayfinding relate to the wider cultural landscape, and there's stunning views up there. Actually the meeting, before I get on, you know what, I'll just take a little journey. My meeting I had just before I got in the car and drove down here, we were in a meeting room upstairs, and it was amazing that because of the view, we could really easily talk about different parts of the project that we were working on. So it's an urban design scheme that we're working on, and it's for an area they're calling the Knowledge Precinct, and they were saying, okay, yeah, so that's that, and so-and-so is working on this, and if you just look to your left, or sorry, that's that to your left. And that was actually really amazing to be able to have that viewpoint and to in real time be kind of talking to the project area that we're now, it was a kickoff meeting, so we're about to start a really interesting project in this area. But the main thing around this building is really this large Aotea space. So there's a really large welcoming area. There's this big kind of double height mahau that's quite, I'd say imposing but welcoming at the same time. It really has a strong sense of presence. And there's like quite clear delineation with the paving and so on. And the two-part, well, again, we lightly touched over everything, but two of the bits that we had that we did the design work for and had a really strong influence on were this compass here. And this compass, this kapehu whetū on the paving in the middle, that refers to all of those important cultural landmarks. So there's Kauika, which is a pā. There's Paritai, which is another pā. It's kind of nestled at the bottom of the Western Hills. Pihoi, which is up on the hill where the St Andrew's Church or Hope Whangarei Presbyterian now. Parihaka, the maunga I've talked about a lot. Manaia, which I've talked about a lot. Tāreo Rewa, which is another pā. And so these all point to the correct kind of compass direction for those different landmarks. Something really nice about this too is that there's a little laneway that runs alongside the building, and there's a new bridge that's being put in that's under construction at the moment. It's called Lovers Lane, and I'm sure it'll get a new other name. But that is actually also the pathway that went from Pihoi pā to Te Kauika pā. So it's like a direct line, and it's really nice to be able to, I guess, walk in the tapuai or the footsteps of our tupuna and really be able to visually see and understand those connections between the pā sites and have them kind of made real for us again. And also why this is a star compass is because the other big intervention in this, one of the other big interventions in this space is also this fence along the edge. I already talked about Te Iwitahi a lot, so I probably don't need to keep talking about him, because I was like thinking probably a lot of people don't know who is Te Iwitahi, ko waia Te Iwitahi, but it is the name that's been gifted for the building. And the reason is that he is a really important tupuna, but I also think that they wanted to emphasize that idea of kotahitanga and all kind of being in this together. So it's nice to have his name revitalized, but then we must ask ourselves who is Te Iwitahi and really understand that whakapapa and connection. Yeah, there's the pattern on the underside of the soffit. And there's this fence. Now the fence, the silhouette is actually the maunga, it's the Western Hills. But what is really neat about it is that, it's the last slide, isn't it? Sorry, I'm just flicking through. And there was also some kōrero around Matakohe that had been in the area previously, and just trying to recognise that in some way, which was a bit of a challenge because we were trying to balance how tapu is this Aotea space, like it's not a marae, but then what is allowed on there is symbols to do with food inappropriate. And so the kaumātua had quite a robust discussion about what that would entail and where that would land. Anyway, I need to get to my last slide. Oh no, I'm inside. Oh look, I'll get back to it. And there was some other whakaaro around river woods and and a connection locally. And this is where I wanted a big carving to be, but we didn't get one. And this is the slide I was trying to get to. So this amazing pattern where it's lit up at night, they each refer to different constellations that are of significance. And so but with that and the kāpehu whetū, it's tying kind of whenua to ki te rangi, and it's drawing that connection between stars and star navigation, as well as understanding where we are on land and our physical connections to our cultural landscape. So it's very stunning lit up at night. And I think, you know, sometimes I think when we do these big projects, we're like, we only have kind of a little role in the scheme of things. But I do recognize that for a lot of these kind of projects, if we weren't involved, we wouldn't even have really any of this cultural expression. And what makes it really feel worth it is when our hapu talk about these spaces and how they feel about them and how they make them feel. And so I have to be reminded that, you know, I'm paraphrasing, but you know that thing where, you know, like there's no small parts, only small actors. And so I think architecture is a bit like that, because it's so intensely collaborative. And I know we kind of get raised up on this like Stark-tech mentality, but the reality is it's always a big team with lots of players, and it's never a single author, even if you're kind of the project lead. And so sometimes we just have to kind of rid ourselves of those illusions and, you know, accept what comes with an intensely collaborative process, which is what architecture always is. And the flip side of that, which is why I keep thinking of that little paraphrased version of a quote, is also because sometimes you do really small jobs, but they're so transformative to people's lives, and you go, well, this is never going to be a magazine, but the person or the people who use this space and whose space it is, they love it, it's changed their lives for the better. I was thinking, because we're doing like a little extension project for Whangarei, and I'm like, when we went there and they talked about what they needed and why, and you know what difference it was going to make to them, I'm like, I just can't wait to be able to deliver this for them, actually, because that's the kind of thing that changes people's lives. So, architecture, we all love it, don't we? Yeah. And there's Te Iwitahi from a distance. And oh yeah, I'm going right for time. I was like, how long have I been talking about the history of Whangarei? Cool. So I'm going to take a sip of water. Great. Okay, so this project, well, I just really marked up a map from one project with another little box. But we've had kind of the fortune of working on a couple of projects that are in really close proximity. And this intersection is really interesting because there's Whangarei Te Rangaparaoa Marae on one corner. Then there's Dairy House, which is, you know, an existing building, but it's been renovated and given a new life. And so there's all these new kind of commercial tenancies in it. We've only worked on one of them, but I think that it's quite significant because of that kind of visual connection and the place that it's located in. And then we've also worked on another project that's on that street corner of Porawini Avenue and Poto Street. And you can see it's a bit of a concrete jungle. There's a lot of concrete and a bit of green. So it's been kind of an interesting experience to try to make these spaces feel more grounded and connected within the environment when they're in this little pocket of concrete. These are just some photos from the intersection. So this is looking up towards Parihaka. This is looking, down the road, and you can see Beds R Us, which is the last corner to conquer. And you can see there Whangarei, Te Ringoparau and Marae on one corner. And then up above Beds R Us is actually a set of units. I don't know if they're still kāinga ora. They were formerly kāinga ora, Housing New Zealand, and may still be. But what I wanted to say about those is that my auntie Sophie Kake used to live in one of those. And she was a kai karanga down at Te Ringoparau, but also at all of the marae around town. And she died when I was 11, so I, didn't know her that well. I knew her as a child, knows an old elder in the family. But she was a really amazing knowledge holder and really well respected in Whangarei. And so when I go to any of the marae around town, her photo hangs in all of them. And one, it's really helpful because I can just say, that's my auntie and you know where I'm from. But also it makes me feel really proud of that connection and that relationship. That she was so loved and respected all those places that even the ones that we're not directly descendants of, they hang her photo in that marae because she was important to them. And so it is handy too if your kai karanga lives just up the hill in the flats. And then this is the other view towards the Western Hills. And again, you can see it's quite an industrial area. The marae almost feels at odds being in this location. It's got a little short atea and, it's a busy road and it's kind of noisy and there's lots of industrial things. Whangarei Te Ringoparau. So the name of the marae is Whangarei Te Ringoparau, but the name of the wharehui is Kākā Purawini. And I wanted to say something about these carvings, and I really hope I'm not getting the order wrong up the top, but the one down the bottom, that's Torongari. And so he came in, I always get this wrong. I think he came in with Puna Harakeke and was associated with Whangārei. But he was also where the kahu o Torongari gets their name. So they're one of the other main hapu interests in Whangarei, who are also whakawapatu. And what I can't remember, so I don't know why I'm saying it out loud, I could have just pretended like I knew what I was saying. But basically, I don't think it's just that they have a direct line of descent from him, although they may as well. I think it's that they specifically came into Whangarei under the protection of Torongari. So there's more of a story to tell, but Torongari is an important ancestor. And then you go up and you can see that there's a face and then there's a figure. And I think that the face is Manaia and that the figure is Tahuhu Nui Orangi, but I might have it the wrong way around, but that's the order I think it's in. And so, I don't know all the tupuna on this whare, but all of them are really critical tupuna to Whangarei, because this whare actually, it's pan-tribal for our hapu of Whangarei. So Kākā Purawini, he came from Ngāti Rehia, so he was from Te Ti. And then he established his kāinga further up north. And then through, I think, Frank Mender, who was a member of parliament, who was like a buddy of his, he bought this land and he bought his timber down from his kāinga and he built a whare that was for the community. And so, he was well known. He established a whare on this site. And after he passed away, a marae proper was established on this site. He was a great innovator. He brought in the telephone line, like in the back blocks. There was like up to 150 people on that line at one point. I think it was what they called a party line. He also established an early banking system. And so because of, he had all these workers and they had a pay system, and I don't quite know the details, but basically it became an early form of a banking system. So he did all these like really out there, he ran for parliament, didn't get in, but did all these really astounding things. And I think it was probably after his death, because it'd be a bit weird if it was before, but the street name Purawini and Kākā Street and Purawini Ave, they were named after him after he'd passed on. But by all accounts, that wasn't even his birth name. It was like a name he gave himself, because Purawini means province. It's just like a transliteration. I don't know what the Kākā relates to, so I'm sure the Purawini whānau have got some great stories to tell about him, but that's a little bit I know. There was a really cool biography or little story about it that Pita Tipene wrote, and that's where I learned a lot of that. And also because one year he won like a posthumous like Chamber of Commerce kind of award. Anyway, I was there at the ceremony and someone got up and told these amazing stories. I'm like, wow, he's so interesting. I didn't know him except for the marae was named after him. So it was actually so cool hearing those stories. And there's a fabulous portrait of him that hangs in the whare. Okay, but you can also see the atia is really short and you have to kind of go at a funny angle. So it's like, there's some, sorry, this is probably the design brain, but I'm like, there's some problems, I would plan it differently. And yeah, so that's our pen tribal but very whangarei marae. And there's Dairy House that's been kind of jazzed up and now has new offices in it. Anyway, so we're going to go across the road. And sorry to Kitty and Chris who aren't here because now they're in my little walking tour. But that morning we did go across the road and had another look at the radiology clinic. And so the radiology clinic, Auckland Radiology Group is, obviously based in Auckland, but they opened up a clinic in Whangārei. And they already had an architect involved, which was AJ Sutton at MA Studio and his team. And really they just wanted us to provide support around the design of the front of house area. And their brief was they wanted a space that was going to be welcoming for Māori patients so that they felt comfortable and safe and actually wanted to be there. Because there's a real problem that people just don't come or they won't make their appointments. A lot of people won't go because it's too far away. If it's all the way in Auckland and they live in Kaikohe, it's really a big barrier. But beyond that, also, people just feel alienated and uncomfortable and it doesn't feel like a safe place for them. So we tried to, one, meet that brief, try to make it welcoming for Māori, whānau Māori patients, and so they used the service, but also tried to, in a gentle way, refer to our cultural landscape and provide those connections. Oh yeah, there's a view back to the marae, I'm going in the door. And actually, sorry, I should say, that morning when we had the opening, this opened actually in January, but Chris hadn't been up to see it because he's based in Tamaki. But he's our guy that spends a lot of time on the drawings, and so he's been in the weeds thinking about these two projects for a long time, especially the MB one. But he hadn't actually been in them, so I know that's always a surreal experience where you've been living in the 3D model and then you actually get to be inside the building. You're like, oh wow, it turned out like this, oh this is great. And so it was really special to have him up because I do recognise I get to traipse around here, there and everywhere, and Chris spends a lot of time crafting very accurate drawings for us and doing a beautiful job, and we love him for that. And I should meet Kitty. Now I feel like I'm just singling out Chris. Kitty's also fabulous, but she's more of a project architect, so she'll do a lot of early concept work, client engagement stuff with me. We'll do a lot of the concept work together. We kind of split it between us, and then she'll kind of support the rest of the team to get the documentation going. Cool. So there's inside. When we had the opening, the furniture wasn't in yet, but what you can see from here is that we included a social kitchen, and the idea is that if large groups came in, especially whānau, there's a space where you can gather, you can make a cup of tea, there's some kai if you need it, and there's also a whānau room which is beyond there that can be open and available to everyone, but if you need to you can close it down and it can be a private space for whānau to gather together. Anyone who's been, well, if you're Māori and you've been to hospital with whānau or even the clinic, but especially hospital, there's large numbers of you and there's nowhere for you to go. And it's always really tricky to navigate in those health spaces. And you just kind of make do and you take turns and you break all the rules around how many people are allowed to be in the room. And I think hospitals are starting to change in response to that. I get the requirements are still really tight, and we've been working on some projects at Whangarei Hospital, and you kind of get the whānau room in and you get this generous space, and then it kind of gets squeezed down again, and then you kind of try and fight for more space again, and it's tricky. But I do think that we do need to change how we design our health spaces, noting that there's lots of complex technical requirements. They still need to be spaces that work for people, and I don't think the complex technical requirements should trump spaces that actually meet people's needs. And that includes people and the whānau they bring, not just individuals there to receive treatment or a service. So we didn't do any of the big medical bits, that's out the back, and actually I think for the architect they received a sketch from the client, and a lot of the things were set in terms of certain machinery needs to take this space and be adjacent to that and so on. Not to say that they didn't have any ability to influence that, but the client was quite clear on the requirements. Where we got a bit more freedom in the front of house space, we just were like, okay, we'll just open that right up and we'll make it welcoming for whānau. There's a waiting area, make it feel less like a waiting room even though it is. There's the front desk, lots of lovely timber, lots of blues and greys again. This is like a feature wall that we did with Ortex and timber battens. So I guess we were the artists on this one, and it was Alia May Ta'ala, who doesn't work with us anymore. She's with the museum now, but Alia May led this piece of work, so I wanted to acknowledge her. And you can see marae in there, love our maunga. Yeah, more of the whānau waiting space. This is a subweight, so they were little subweights, so we tried to kind of colour code them and have a bit of a wayfinding system that made sense and wasn't too tricky to get around. Another subweight. And we caught them first thing in the morning, so no one was in there, so they were happy for us to take photos. And I didn't take a photo of them because they stepped out of out of frame. But also there was people there at the front desk, and they seemed to really love working there. And I know everyone wants post-occupancy evaluations, and no one will pay for them. But it's nice going and saying, "Hey, how do you like your building? You know, what doesn't work? It's okay, you can tell me. I'm not on the job now." And usually it's really gratifying because people are usually quite honest. They'll tell you the things they love and also maybe the things that don't work, so take note of them too. And you can see again a strong connection to Whangārei, Te Ringa, Parao and Marae. And then there's the Beds Are Us that I hope gets redeveloped, and I hope we're on the project because then we can, you know, complete the corner and have that connection. And I think that I actually really thought I could talk for a whole hour, but I seem to have finished and it's only 7:30. How good is that? So kia ora koutou, thanks for listening to my kōrero.
Great stuff, Jade. So you okay for some questions?
Yeah, go for it.
So I've got one to start with. World's government's changed a lot in the last 6-8 months, but your work is on a much longer arc than that. Is it getting easier?
Like, do you mean in terms of being able to do this kind of work?
Yeah, like is there more acceptance of that this is necessary, this is beneficial?
I do think so. I know that it's easy to kind of think short term and think, oh my goodness, well, if some of the policies and legislative changes feel a little regressive, oh no, they don't like Māori things, whatever. But I do think that, I might eat my words, but right now I think this is a bit of a blip and, you know, it's just a political swing. But I do think the general trajectory of progress will hold firm. Because I think the expectation and the precedent's been set quite strongly, and also for a lot of staff that work in government departments who might be client representatives or might be managing development processes or procurement and figuring out what the scope is, they might have done a whole bunch of projects where this focus is just business as usual for them now. And architects, including the big firms and also some of the big engineering firms, they've probably done quite a lot of these projects, and sure, it's a continual journey and not everyone's in the same place yet. But because so many people have been exposed to this way of working, they're going to show up and be like, so, obviously we're going to work with the hapu or work with the iwi depending on where you know, like they'll bring those assumptions and questions and challenges to their client, or the client representative will take that to their senior leadership and be expecting it. So I think it's a bit hard to undo. But again, I could eat my words, yeah.
Are there any other questions in the house? Up the back.
You mentioned that you had some reserves about becoming the, I guess, architectural identity of Whangarei.
Yeah.
If you guys got the opportunity to design something new to add to that identity, you know, what would that dream project be?
Yeah, tribal parliament. So, I don't know, something political and really reasserting that identity. Because I know I talked a lot about Whangarei, but like something about Whangarei is that most of the town area is owned by like 5 families, and most of those are colonial descendants, and the streets are named after those original colonial people that are there tupuna. And that hasn't changed. And it's an old boys club of a town actually. It's like quite a lot of political powers concentrated in a small number of people, and they're all, you know, friends who like handshake agreements. And God, I hope none of them are in the room when I just said that. I didn't see any. But really that's how Whangarei is run actually, and so that can be a bit of a barrier. But you know, and we don't have hardly any land left. So I think something that is quite a strong assertion of identity, that also is something that has political status and mana, a bit like that Civic Centre really, which is great, but maybe somewhere that isn't associated with the colonial form of governance, which is what I would consider local government to still be. Not saying it has to be its future, but I think it's its present and past.
Any other questions?
Kia ora, Andrew.
Jade, there's a sort of obvious question of where to next. And I wonder if we're not ambitious enough as architects or visionary enough. And I wonder whether you might share what your ambitions and visions are for your future.
Oh, yes. I mean, honestly, I want to see our land returned, and I want to see our hapu, iwi and hapu depending on the area, but if I'm thinking of Whangarei, we're very hapu-centric. I'd love to see our land returned, but with genuine partnership and resources from government agencies who've held that power and held those resources to be able to hand over some power and resources so that we can actually transform that environment in a way that kind of serves us all. Like, there's no point giving our hapu back land right now, we've got no resources to do anything with it. And so I do think there needs, one thing I've been advocating for, which I don't know if it's going to go anywhere, but I've heard our hapu have had some good conversations with them. This is with Whangarei, so who knows what their future is. Anyway, they've had some really good conversations with our hapu, where our hapu is trying to argue for a model where they do the development in partnership, and then Whangarei returns the land, but also provides, like, you know, like a suspensory loan or something. Anyway, but returns the loan through some kind of mechanism, and then pays the rent that enables the hapu to pay off that loan with the goal of eventually owning it. But also you're getting a developed asset and ongoing resources as opposed to a piece of land that you might not be able to do anything with because you've got no money. Anyway, without getting in the weeds around tenure and like treaty law and systems, and you know, I do think that we need to have mana whenua being in control of these projects a lot more. Because what I see actually on some of these complex jobs that we've worked on, there's probably more than that, but at least two axes of power. And there's a real tension between our hapu, who we think of as our real bosses, and the paying client, which is a government agency, that might kind of agree to hand over power, but then maybe personnel change and it tilts this way, or maybe they are happy with handing over power until it's a decision they don't like and then they take it back. And there's a little bit of a seesaw and a little bit of a power struggle. And sometimes it starts really great and then someone changes and the next person's got a different attitude, and it's amazing how quickly you think what is a robust arrangement can kind of erode. And then, you know, I might be shooting myself in the foot saying this, but I do think because on these big projects, naturally we work with bigger firms, right? We're not equipped, we don't have the track record to be doing these really, really big complex projects. It's our hapu that have asked us to be in this space. But there's naturally a power imbalance because we're a tiny, tiny player and we'll be working with a big, big company, and it is tricky to even that out. And we've worked with partners who've really tried, but there is an inherent power imbalance. And so I've often find it's like this shaped seesaw, and it makes these projects, you get to the end and you forget how hard it was, and you're like, oh, what a great outcome, everyone loves it. But while it's happening, I go, oh my God, can't we just be the architect for marae and papakāinga? It's like such an easier ride. But then I'm reminded that we have a duty to do it. So I don't know if that answers the question. Probably the summary, land back, hapu have more control, then we might actually get to see more ambitious visions for our future. And I think we can see it with Ngāti Whātua, for example, in Tamaki. What happens when mana whenua have a bit more control and resource? We're starting to see some big transformation as a result. So, yeah.
So has there not been a treaty settlement?
Oh no, okay, that's a whole other story. So we've got 3 overlapping mandates in Whangarei, which is Ngāpuhi, Ngāti Wai, Ngāti Whātua, which causes all sorts of challenges. But actually, as we are, even though bits of those here we might have settled, we're unsettled as Whangarei, and we're really just a sort of rogue band of hapu. We've got no formal structures, nothing like that. And we might not anytime soon, even though they're trying to crack that nut, because the big thing for Ngāpuhi, or at least parts of Ngāpuhi, and definitely Whangarei, is that the government has never signed an agreement without a final settlement clause in it. And so our interpretation of it is they might say in our Waitangi Tribunal finding for the Stage 1 report, oh, well, you didn't cede your sovereignty in 1840, but you've signed it in 2024 when you signed this agreement. And so, you know, our best legal interpretations have been that that would be the case unless they remove the final settlement clause, which to date they've not been willing to do. Kia ora.
Do you have any advice for, like, if we're talking about ambitions in the future, do you have any advice for students and how we should go about, like, what should we be asking our teachers and educators for if we want to become equipped to sort of become architects who can approach mana whenua in, for want of a better word, in an appropriate fashion? Like,
I mean, obviously advocating for yourself is good, but something that is coming is that we get our competency standards from Australia, and the 2021 standards, which are the latest version, have some really important competency standards around working with Indigenous communities and cultural concepts. And there's a process at the moment that's underway to develop an addendum and to formally adopt those here. And at the moment it says Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander and country, so those words aren't going to fly, but I think there's a deeper dive into what that actually means for this context. Before, it's never been a problem just to take them wholesale because there's been no difference. But now that that exists, it's kind of pushing change here, which I think is already happening, but I think this is going to push it in other parts where it's maybe not happening. And for anyone who doesn't know, those competency standards relate to initial registration, ongoing registration, but also accredited schools of architecture and what they teach. So all of the schools are going to have to be able to competently offer that. So I don't know if that doesn't really tell you what you can do, but it's coming. And they should be doing it anyway.
And monopoly of Te Ao principles, is this adopted at Whangarei and up north? Do you believe it could be spread throughout New Zealand to create a framework to create our own unique architecture in New Zealand?
Yeah, awesome question. So Te Ao principles, they came about, I don't know, 2006 kind of onwards. 2006 was Te Ao strategy, which was at Te Ao Marae and Flaxmere. And then over the kind of years that followed, there was collaboration between some of our leading art hall members, including Roe Hoskins and Mana Whenua and Tāmaki, to develop this set of principles, which are really an attempt to make translation of cultural ideas tangible in the built environment, because we'd had a go before, but it was always like wairuatanga, and people were like, well, what does that mean? How do I make it into a built thing? And so a really practical step, but to me the principles have always sat within a methodology, and the methodology is the really transferable thing. So the work we'll be doing in Whangārei, Te Parawhau have developed their own set of principles, Te Kahua Torangari have developed their own set of principles, and we engage a Te Aranga type methodology with them, but using their own set of priorities, which was always the intention. So it's totally scalable, and you don't even have to follow that methodology, but it's really adaptive and it's meant to be flexible, so you could adapt it anywhere around the country. Kara.
Why do you teach, and what does that add to your personal practice?
Yeah, okay, so what I'm doing at the moment is that I'm developing an architectural dictionary in Te Reo Māori, and then with the intention of running a taught master's program in Te Reo Māori, like in Raumaki Reo. And what I want to do with that is attract carvers, weavers, painters, Māori artists who already speak Te Reo and have this base knowledge around mātauranga Māori. And then I want to bring them into my program, and then we're going to give them these tools of the architect that they maybe didn't have before, and then elevate their status in that way, and then send them back to their communities. And we already have people who operate that way, and I hope neither in the room, they won't mind me saying it, like Graham Tipene or Rangi Kipa, they're both trained as kai whakairo, but they really have this status, a similar status to architects in terms of design lead across a number of things that they do without formally being architects or recognised as such. So that's what I'm trying to do, and AUT, which again, I'm sorry, Auckland Uni is also doing great things, and I've got some wonderful colleagues here, but the reason I went there was because they had set the program up to have a regenerative design and Indigenous focus, and they seemed really keen to resource my goals and aspirations that were aligned with that, so I was like, okay, great, and I work really well that way. If I've got like a hyper ambitious idea and someone just goes, oh, go for it, I won't get in your way. And then I can just do it. So I love that for me. So that's the plan, that's what I'm working on. I am teaching just in the kind of, I'm calling it the mainstream program, which isn't fair really, because actually it's really progressive, but it is taught in English is really what I mean. And what I'm trying to do, I guess, is like I'm a baby academic. I'm like, I'm not even a proper academic really. So I really like to know how it works first before I launch my program. And so I'm really trying to support our students in line with our thinking of, Indigenous focus, regenerative focus, and sharing what I've learned so far in a really live way, because I'll go into these programs and I'll be like, cool, this happened to me this week. Let's talk about it, and here's something I learned yesterday. And so sometimes I'm learning along with them, and it's a really active line of inquiry that aligns with our practice work. So I think that interchange dialogue between practice and teaching can be a really, really fruitful space. And the juggle of traveling between two places is very annoying, but the teaching's been really cool. Yeah, cool. Sorry, long answer.